a pattern that I really want to share on this call, and it's the fact that you can actually have a black box. So a black box is really something that it's not connected to the internet, and there are many situations where you have that. So if you remember the last time I was here and I was doing something that was non-AI, I was telling you how you could actually privately connect to service, right? So I did create a video on that. And I'm sure everyone that joined really saw how it was easy. So what we did is that we connected two services, one from one VPC to the other VPC without the internet. It was all private, using a technology we call PrivateLink. And that PrivateLink basically just allows you to expose two services, connect them together. You don't really need them to use the internet. They can use the private AWS network and just connect to themselves, right? So today we're actually now going to be extending that. Today we're not going to be doing two services that needs that kind of connection. Rather, we're going to be building a black box that will be using that to talk to all the AWS services, right? So let's just do a recap. We had a situation where we had VPC A. So I'm just going to see if I can do this. So we had VPC A, and then we had like a private link, right? So we did create like a private link. Right? We did create a private link and we called this one VPC A and VPC B. That was really what we achieved. We did everything that was needed to get this done. So we created like a private link. Let me see if I can actually erase this. So I'm just going to call it what it is. So it is actually AWS private link, right? That's what we built. So we did use this to connect two VPCs together. So we took VPC A and we connected it completely to VPC B without no network connectivity, basically. So it was all private. But this is like, and I think I did explain why you have this, because sometimes this VPC B here is a client. It's somebody you're trying to expose a service to, right? So you here, think about it, you have like a service. So this works for a service, service client architecture, right? Because you have like a service, right? And there is a client on the other end. And you don't want a situation whereby you're exposing your entire VPC for to a particular client. So you're just exposing the service that you want to expose, right? That's exactly what we showed. But today, we're going to now be building a black box. And the idea of a black box is the fact that we still can use AWS PrivateLink to build a box that does not have connection to the internet, but it basically can do everything that you can think about. So it can connect to S3, it can pull container images, it can run a service. That service is available to other services if they really care and they want to consume it. And that's really what the focus is going to be. But PrivateLink is what's more or less like, it's what allows you to build that kind of pattern, right? Because what we did here, we built our own service. But what I am going to be trying to show on the call is really how you can actually leverage some of the AWS services that already exist. So we built ours in the previous call, but in this call, we're going to use all the private links. We won't be able to use all. There are so many of them, but we're going to use very important. We'll build step by step, and we'll try to use more or less like many of the private links that already exist from AWS and have a solution that is pretty much locked. It's a box, but it does everything that it needs to do, right? So the whole idea is that we start with a box. And the way I'm going to approach this is that we will take a box. And because that's really how it works. You take like a box, you customize it. So the first thing we will do for us to achieve that is that we will create a first box. And that first box is really what we really need. What we really need. We'll basically put all the package. So we'll take a bus. So we'll take well-known AMI. And then what we are going to do is we will customize it. So we will customize it, right? There are many ways we can do this, right? So we'll take a well-known AMI, we'll customize it, and there are many ways we can do it. But in this particular demo, I'm just going to use more or less like, I'll use a public VPC to do this, right? But just so you know, there is a service called, what is it called? It's called AMI Builder, okay? I think I've showed that before. I'm just going to close the screen and show you that there's actually a service called the AMI, I think it's build, yes. So EC2 image builder, there is a service called, let me try to zoom this a bit. I'm not sure if you're seeing it clearly, but let me try to, did I just do it the other way around? I'm supposed to be zooming in. Let me see. Okay, I think this is better now. But the idea, I think I've shared this before. When I was really introducing AWS to the guys who met me at the early stage, right? So we will do, in our own case, we'll use a public VPC, right? But there is also another option. So I'm just going to use, or you can use like an EC2 image builder, right? So the whole idea is that you take an AMI, right? You take an AMI, you give it everything that you need. And that's really how we package stuff, right? If you think about it, that's exactly how we package stuff. Because if you think about how the real world works, right? There's like an infra team that takes an AMI. They basically put everything that AMI needs, right? For you to do anything you want. So more or less like you will see how we take a base AMI, we install everything that is needed in there. In this case, we're just going to install Docker. So we'll take a base AMI, we're going to install Docker in it. The point is that we don't want you going to the internet to try to install Docker. So a team can hold this part of the system, right? So this could be something an infra team does. So I'll call it infra, I'll just call it an infra team. Infra team, right? So what if, they'll take a well-known AMI. In this case, we're just going to take Linux 2023, we'll customize it. And then once we do that, we have like a base to start from. But the next thing we're going to see is that you have like a box, it doesn't have internet access, but we want to do so many things in that box. How do we go about it? And that's really what I'm going to be showing this call. So we've just looked at the first thing. So we will take like a base AMI and then we'll customize it, right? So let's go on that journey. The first thing we want to do, we want to build a black box. So the goal is still what is on the screen, is black box on AWS. But how do we do that? I said we'll take the infra team in this case. But yeah, I'm actually an infra person, so I'm doing this. But maybe there's a team who's pretty much responsible for this. They are making sure they are giving you the right AMIs, the AMIs that are safe. They've gone through security screening, they are good to go, and all that. So we're going to be mimicking that. So what we're going to do is that we'll start with an AMI. So I'm going to go to EC2. We'll build it one step at a time, and then you see how we would extend the solution, because one stage will build on the other. But let's build on the first stage. So the first stage, we take an instance. So here we'll just launch an instance. We'll call it Linux 2023, right? Remember, I said there are two ways you could have done this. Okay, I think I'm not sharing that screen that I need you to see. So let me just hide this one. Remember, I said there are two ways you can do this, right? You can either use EC2 image builder as one step, but you can also just, in this case, because I just want to do it live on the call, I'm just going to launch this in a public subnet, customize the EC2 machine, take an AMI of it, okay? And we're going to do all that in the call. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a starting AMI. So in this case, I'll call it Linux 2023. That's the AMI. Just to keep my cost low, or no cost, I'm going to use free tier. I don't need a key pair because, I can always log into the machine and do whatever I want to do. I don't need SSH, right? But we'll come back to that. The only important thing here that I need to show you is that I need an IAM role to use. So I need like an instance profile to use. Here I have a role called EC2. I think it's EC2. I'm going to do EC2. If I scroll down, it's EC2 role. Okay. I'll show you what that role looks like, just so that you know that we need to see what that role looks like. The point is that you need that kind of role. So if you look at the role, there's nothing special about the role. In this case, it doesn't even have that permission again, but I'm going to fix it now. So I'm using this EC2 role, but I actually want to fix this role to have a permission, and I'm just going to attach a policy, and it is called SSM core, okay? So it's SSM, I'm just going to use the word core. So it's this one. So managed SSM core, I'm going to add that permission. Now we have the permission, and then I can go. So if you think about it, it's just a plain, it allows EC2 to assume it. It has the permission for managed instance core. And this will allow me to just SSH, more or less like use SSM to go into the machine without needing SSH, right? So I'll go back to that instance that I'm trying to create. I'll use that role. I've already given it. And honestly, that's really all I need. And if you think about it, notice that right now I'm putting it in a public VPC. So this is like the default VPC that comes with my account, right? So auto assign public IP, I really wanted to do that because this is like a public VPC, okay? So I'm going to launch this instance. So let's give it some time to launch. So I'm just going to go to instances. There is one that is pending. So it's this one, and it is called Linux 2023. Remember, if I go back to the image, while that image is building, we're building the black box, and it's going to make sense at the end of the day. But what have we just done? We took a well-known AMI. In this case, we took more or less, it could even be a custom AMI. Remember that you can actually use image builder to build your own AMI. But in this case, we're starting off from a well-known AMI in this case, which is Linux 23. We're customizing it. And once we customize, right, we'll start building the black box. Okay, so it says it's running. I'm going to give it time. So I'll go back to the instances. It says it's running, it's initializing. And then while that is in place, let me see if I can, I'm just going to give it time. The next thing I want to do is that everything, you can't have a black box if it is public, right? And if I have to do this, it has to be in a private, it has to be in a private VPC, right? The point is that we want to build a black box, and there's no way a black box can be something that is publicly accessible. The whole idea is that we want something that is just a box. It's shut off completely from the internet, but it still functions. It can load an application. It can do everything you want it to do. Okay. So what we're going to do is, while the EC2 is initializing, I'm going to take you to my code. So I'm going to go to my left screen. So I'm going to hide this one, and then show. I don't know if my cursor is here, but let me just try and open it. I think, yeah, it's here. So what I'm going to show you is, I'm going to also make this a bit bold. I hope you can see my screen, and then I'm going to zoom in a bit. Okay. So I have a folder here called black box, and I'm going to explain what I'm doing in here. What I'm doing here is very simple. Usually the things I know, I'm not going to stress you on it. And those are the things that are here, but I'm going to explain my thought process. Okay. The things I know, I'm not going to stress you on it. Okay. What I'm going to show you here is just a code that creates a VPC, and basically it's going to create a private VPC for us. Okay. That's really what it's going to do. And I'm going to show you what that is. It's very simple code, and we're going to walk through it. Remember, we're building a black box, right? So, but we still need to look at the thought process. So let's see main. Main is basically just a simple file that creates a VPC. You can see here, I'm creating a very black box VPC. And what I'm saying is that I need a VPC. Let's forget about everything there. The most important thing you should just take note is that it's only going to have a private subnet. Okay. I'm using this just because if I have to take you through the route of creating a VPC in the account, it's going to take time. It's going to take time. It's going to take out from the things I want to show you. So here, I'm not going to show you the steps of creating VPC in the account. It's not a VPC class, right? But I'm creating a basic VPC, but it's only going to have private subnets, right? Once I have a private subnet, the next thing I'm creating is, I'll create two security groups, right? The first security group is one that is for interface endpoint. And because I'm going to use a lot of them here in this particular module that I'm showing you, this black box that we're trying to build. Remember, we're building this on top of like the PrivateLink that we've built on before, right? So in this case, we're still going to more or less like create two security groups, right? One will be for everything interface related that we're going to be creating. We're going to create several interface endpoints, and that would allow us to do this. So with the first interface endpoint, just take note of two things. It requires an ingress of 443, right? It also requires to be able to go everywhere. I'm just keeping it that simple. The next security group is really for the EC2 machine. And what we're saying is that because I know at the end of the day, the black box is going to host a service, and I want that to be available on 80. It also should be able to go it should be able to go everywhere, right? But this everywhere is actually locked because it's going to be a private VPC. Yeah, where it can go, it's actually limited, kind of, but it's fine. And honestly, that's it. The next thing I'm really doing here is that I'm saying that for the EC2 machine, I want you to allow the interface endpoints to be able to access it using SSH. And I'm going to show you how it makes sense at the end of the day. So here we're saying for the EC2 machine, I want you to be able to allow the interface endpoint to access the EC2 machine using SSH. Remember, this machine is going to be completely off the internet. It means that the SSM, the SSM service, many of these services, there's no way you can resolve them because the box does not have internet. It's a black box. Once we leave that, every other thing is now, okay, like the EC2 machine will have a set of roles. I think these are things I've discussed in the past, but you know that every service in AWS, especially EC2 will need like a role for you to know exactly what to do in your AWS account. So in this case, I'm creating a role that will be used by the EC2 machine. It will have manage instance call, which is the same one that I showed you just now. And then it will have a set of permissions, more or less like one to use ECR. And really that's it. I think just to use ECR, and then there's one that I created here that has like S3 read only. So think about it. This is just, we're setting up the black box. And here all we're doing is that we're creating we're creating two security groups, right? One for the EC2 machine to allow AT ingress and to allow outbound network. The second one is basically to allow connection from the interface endpoint, right? Because that would also use a security group. Okay. So what I'm going to do is here, I'm going to do Terraform apply because that's really what we want to do here. Okay. So if you know Terraform, it's basically simple. If you write Terraform, all you just need to do is just do init and then do Terraform apply, right? So I'm going to apply this, and it shows you exactly what it wants to create. But everything it's creating is this single file, right? That's all it's creating. Okay, that's the complete file. So I'm just going to do yes. Okay. So this will create us a private VPC, right? Because we want a VPC that is locked, a VPC that doesn't have connection to the internet, and that's where we're going to explore the black box and everything we're going to build around it. But it's still creating, right? So it's still creating the VPC. So let me go back to our, our EC2 machine. Now it's ready. So we're going to do, just going to refresh. It looks like the EC2 machine is ready. The next thing we want to do is here. Remember, this machine is currently on the internet, and that's why it has public, it even has a public DNS. It has like a, so this is not the black box, right? But if you go back to the diagram that I shared before, let me open my iPad, you see that we said, we want an image that is customizable, and there are two ways we can go about it. We can just create something that is in the public VPC, go in, customize it, and then use the AMI subsequently. But we can also use this step, we can do it with Image Builder. I just feel Image Builder will be a bit complex, and I'm not going to throw that out, okay? So what we're going to do is we'll connect, right? Right now, it is easy for us to do this because Session Manager would work because this box is on the internet, but this is not the one we're building. So I'm just going to connect. So when I connect to the box, what am I going to do once I'm in the box? I think I'm just going to do this. So I'm going in as sudo, right? Now that I'm in the box, what I really want to do, I have a set of commands that I will just, they're very short commands, but I don't want to bore you with pasting. So first I will update the box. I'm not sharing that screen. I think I need to take this out. So the first thing I'm doing here is I'm updating the box. Remember, we're still at the customization step. So here I'm just trying to update the box. This machine currently has access to the internet, right? So if you do ping, if I go here, for example, and I do ping google.com, yeah, it has access to the internet. But the black box we are building will not have access to the internet, okay? This one has. So what we've done updates. The next thing we want to do is we want to basically install Docker, right? Because at the end of the day, we really want to have a black box that uses that, hosts a service, deploys that service, the service is consumable, using Docker, but all in the box, okay? So we'll install Docker. Let's give it some time to install, okay? Let's just give it some time. While that is ongoing, okay, this is obviously the same browser, but while that is ongoing, let me just check the VPC that we've created. Remember, we created a VPC. So if you look at the resource that we created, there was a VPC. There are now two VPCs, right? There is black box VPC. And in this VPC, it's really two private subnets. You can see it's all private subnets. So anything you throw in here doesn't have access to the internet. That's the point. It does not have. There's everything here doesn't have access to the internet. Good. So we'll go back here. That is done. So we'll start Docker. Docker is installed already. We'll just start it, right? We've started it. Now we'll just enable Docker. The point is that we want a situation whereby if the machine restarts, Docker is already automatically restarted. Okay, so these are basic. And honestly, if you check, some of these things I've already introduced it in my lab. If you're new to Docker, there are basic things you can learn about Docker in terms of like some very, very basic command. And these are also very basic Linux command, okay? So the next thing I wanted to, let me just do status. So more or less like see if it's working, you can see it's actually active, right? So Docker is running, okay? So once that is out of the way, I'm just going to clear my screen a bit. The next thing I want to do is just do Docker, for example. So we have a Docker that is Docker is already running in that box, right? So we can also do Docker version and do Docker PS. Okay, so Docker is currently running. Good. So our job is done. If you look at the first screen, if I go back to the screen that I showed you before, this is me. I've done all my infra part. I've taken a well-known AMI. I've customized it. The things that needed to go to the internet, they've gone to the internet. They've downloaded the package that we need. In this case, Docker. Okay. And now, what do we need to do? We need to build an image of this AMI, right? So what we're going to do is I'm going to leave this part and go back to the EC2 instance. So what I'm going to do is go here, instance. I'm just going to refresh. This is the one that we created. And then I'm going to create an AMI of it. The point is that I need to be careful that I'm sharing the right screen at all times. So here, let's go back. Remember, we just built a black box. We just built a machine that had Linux 2023 as the base. We added Docker on top of it. And now with Docker already part of it, the next thing we want to do is to take an image of that machine, right? It's our journey to having a black box. So what we're going to do is that we'll look at this, we'll go to image template, and we'll say create an image. We're trying to create an image, a base image out of the one we've created. So we'll call it black box EC2 AMI, okay? Just to be specific. Here, I'll say my black box EC2 AMI, good. We'll reboot the instance. I don't need to do any other thing. I'll just create the image, okay? We'll create the image. So if I go back on the left, if I go to AMIs, this is the one we're creating. So we'll give it some time. It's going to take some time to create, but you can see here, let's see what it's doing. It's pending, okay? It's actually in a pending state. So let's refresh. We've done two major things. Let's refresh. We've done two major things. We said we want to build a black box on AWS. And this is more or less like a build up to a class that I taught where I was teaching you how you can actually have two services connect, right? VPC A to VPC B, all using AWS PrivateLink. And we said the technology that powered that, is something we can extend. And that's actually what makes you build a solution that is completely private using a lot of AWS services, but it's not on the internet. And we said the only way you can do that is you create an image. You take an image, you customize it, and that becomes like your base image, right? So what we did is we took a very known AMI, which is AWS Linux 2023. We customized it, and now we're creating an image of it, right? That's really what we're doing. So I'm going to go AMI here. Just go here and refresh and see if it's available. It's still pending, right? Good. So while that is pending, let's go back to the things we created before now. So if you remember from Terraform, we did create some VPCs, right? So we'll check there and see what we have. So go to your VPCs. We'll go to your VPCs. We'll check the black box VPC. That's the one I'm interested in, right? We created the black box VPC. It has two private subnets. We'll go into those private subnets. We check the route tables. For example, this has one route table, right? So we'll go to route tables for this black box VPC, right? So when you check the first route table, what you notice is that it is currently has this route to say if you're going here, it has only a local route. So this VPC, anything you throw in this VPC will not be able to go to the internet, okay? Subnet association, I think the most important thing is just for you to know that it only has a local route, right? That's all you need to know. So, and what else did we create? Let's go back to security groups. So we created two security groups, right? So we'll look at them. We are in that VPC. So let's select that VPC. I'm just going to scroll down and do black box, right? So let's filter it by the security box, the ones we created. We created the first one. Let's forget about this default. But the first one we created was EC2 security group, right? Let's take a look at the inbound rule for that security group, right? So it has HTTP, right, on 80, meaning it will allow HTTP because the service itself will be exposed on HTTP. So we're allowing that from the VPC. We're also allowing SSH, but not from everywhere. Rather, we're allowing SSH from the interface endpoints. We don't have those endpoints yet. We'll create them. And that's really the core of what I'm teaching right now on this call, okay? So we have this, and then let's go to the interface endpoint. It's also a very simple VPC security group, right? The security group. It has one that says 443. That's all you need when you're creating like an interface endpoint security group. You just need 443. And then for outbound rule, we said you can go everywhere, right? If you think about both security groups, they share something in common. For this one, outbound is everywhere, right? So both of them have outbound, all going everywhere. The only difference is just how their inbound rule is conditioned. One has HTTP on 80 and SSH from the VPC endpoint, while the second one, this one, has, it has one inbound from 443 and also outbound to everywhere, okay? So once we've established that, we're good. The next thing we want to go back and do is just let's check our AMI if it's ready. So go Systems Manager. This is closed. So let's go to EC2 instances. Where were we before? I'm just going to search for EC2 here. I hope you still can see my screen clearly. But let's go to EC2 instances. Let's go to the AMI we're creating and see if that AMI is ready. Yeah, it is available, right? So the AMI is actually this one. That's the, oh, I think I called it the wrong thing, but I can just correct it here. I think it's fine, but it's actually the black box AMI, okay? Just so that I correct the name and be sure that that's the name. So I think there was a typo in the name, okay? So we have an AMI, black box, that has been created of something that was on the internet. The next thing we want to do is to take that AMI and throw it into a box, more or less like into a secluded space, right? So if I go back to the diagram of what I was sharing before, we said we took a well-known AMI, we customized it. In this case, we use the public VPC to do that, but you can also use EC2 image builder, okay? So what I'm going to do is now to create an EC2 instance. That's the first thing to do. So what we're going to do is we will launch an EC2 instance. So this is running, but this is public. I'm going to terminate this once I'm done with what I'm creating, okay? So let me show you. Right now, this is currently public. You can see it has like a public IP address. This cannot be the black box we are designing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch an EC2 instance. And here I'm going to say private EC2, right? So that's what we're going to call it. It's private. It's going to use my AMI. So the one that I own. And you can see there are two AMIs, but the one we created for this call is this one, the black box AMI. So I'm going to use it. So I'm using that AMI. I'm also using T2 micro. I'm going to go without a key pair because I don't need it for this. But again, this is where it becomes interesting because now I need to choose which VPC I'm going to be using. I won't be using the default VPC again. So I'm going to be going to use the black box VPC, which we created. So it's a VPC. It's all private. You can see it has two private subnets, right? 2A, 2B. It doesn't have any public. So I'm going to use the first one. So 2A. You can see it's not going to get a public IP address. Security group, I'm going to use one that we created from Terraform, right? So I'm going to use black box EC2 SG, okay? So the one that is for the EC2. There's something that is important that I just need to do apart from all this that I've chosen is the fact that I want to use an IAM rule, right? And that IAM rule is just for us to be able to do Instance Connect. So if I scroll down, you can see there's a black box EC2 profile rule that I want to use, right? I'm going to click on it. That's it. So two things that I did. I just threw it in a private VPC, number one. Secondly, I also gave it a role, and that role is just for us to be able to use SSM to go into the machine. That's one. And then secondly, I gave it a security group that I showed you exactly what that security group is made up of, right? I did show that. Okay, so it's done. There's no need for user data script. It's not about, that's not it. So we don't need a user data script. Ideally, this is where you put like your boots if you wanted something to run when the EC2 machine is coming up, but we don't need all that, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the EC2 machine. I've called it a private EC2 machine. I just want to be sure I'm using the right AMI so that I don't mix it. It's owned by me. It's this one, so it's fine. So I'm just going to create it, launch instance, okay? So that instance is launching. It is launching. I'm just going to go to my instances. And here, in this instance, what you'll notice is that the private EC2 instance is launching, right? So what I can actually do is I can terminate this, right? This is not going to help us. This is not the black box we are building. So I'll terminate the Linux 2023 public instance. So I'm going to terminate it. I'll skip OS deletion so that it can be fast. It's not supported on this. No problem. I'm just going to terminate it. In this case, terminate the instance. I'm not going to skip OS deletion. So it's going to go, right? So let's give it some time. So this Linux 2023, I've now terminated it because I only used it to build an AMI, right? And that's the only place I needed to be connected to the internet. But I've also mentioned that you don't need to use a public internet to do this. You can as well just use, the EC2 image builder to do the same thing, right? You can't use that. So in this case, I've terminated it. So let's give it time. So this box is running. This one is trying to come up. This is where it's going to get interesting because this is where we want to now start building the black box, okay? Because all we have is an EC2 machine. It's not connected to the internet. It has a role, it has a security group, it is shown in a private subnet. So we now need to start figuring out the magic that it takes for us to even get into the machine first. That's number one. You have to be able to get into the machine. And then once we get into the machine, we can begin to do more things, right? So let's wait. Let's give it time for it to run. It's actually running. So if we go back to instances, we've terminated this one. This one says it's running. The question should be, can we connect like this? Ideally, we should be able to use SSL, like SSH, like the what do you call it, session manager right now to go into the machine. But you can see it's a black box. There's no way it's going to work. The one that we threw in the public subnet, it worked because it could go to the internet, it could connect to the SSM service. But in this case, this one is not going to work. It's definitely not going to work. The reason is just because it's a black box. It does not have access to the internet. The guy is just there. It's just like a box that does not know anything. Okay, so that's where we'll start. Basically, we'll start fleshing it out. We'll be giving it more capability, but in a very secure manner, because that's the whole idea. That's what we're building. Okay. So what we can do is, let's see, the instances, it's running. Basically, it's running. It's here. It's initialized. It's running. Good. So maybe now it's a good time to go back to the diagram so that we can see what we've accomplished so far. Okay. So we'll go back here. So what have we done? If you think about what we've done, we took a well-known AMI, we customized it, right? So we took a well-known AMI and we customized it, right? So we customized, but we used a public VPC and we did not use an EC2 image builder. Okay. Now it's in a private VPC. We've just launched an EC2 instance and now it's in a private VPC, but we cannot do anything, right? So let me scroll down a bit. So what I'm going to do is, so we've done that, right? And then we created EC2 from AMI, right? In private VPC, right? We've done this step already, right? We've done this one. Let me see. Good. So we've created this one. We've done this one already. So we created EC2 from AMI in the private VPC, right? But now we cannot do anything, right? There's nothing. We've seen it. We cannot do anything. The machine, we can't even log in, right? And that is where we now need to start enabling the things that can actually give us access into the machine, right? So enable, so this is where we enable the needed interface endpoints. Okay, that's it. So that's the first solution. We're still trying to build a black box, right? So we've customized the AMI. We took an AMI, we've customized it. We created an EC2 instance from that AMI. We threw it in a private subnet. But now the EC2 machine is not usable in quotes, right? So what do you think we need to do? For the first thing we want to do is that this is where I'm going to introduce you to many of the VPC endpoints that are out there, right? Especially the ones that are useful for this demo. The first one we want to do is that we want to be able to do connect. I want to be able to use session manager, but because the guy is in a black box, it does not have access to the internet. It means that we need to do more. Okay, we will go and create a couple of VPC endpoints. People, when they more or less like they go through their AWS journey. Some people just know that VPC endpoint works, but some people don't know when you actually need them. They just know VPC endpoint, yeah, you need them. You can keep your network private, but some people don't really know where you need them versus when you don't need them, right? And that's what I'm that's the concept of this lab, right? The fact that you can have a working black box, right? That is not connected to the internet, but it still works. It can load application. It can do every nice thing that you have out there. Okay, so now that we have a black box, right, in the private VPC, it doesn't have access to anything. The next thing we really want to do is start building those building blocks. And you say I will build all of them. Okay, so the next thing we want to do, we go to VPC, we'll go to our endpoint, right? Right now, there is no endpoint, right? It means that if something is in the private subnet and it doesn't have access to the internet, there's no way it can resolve a lot of the services that we need in quotes, right? So we'll create the first one. We'll create an endpoint. In this case, we're going to call it SSM, right? Because that EC2 machine, we wanted to try to go in with SSM. But the problem is that the guy is a black box. He does not have access to the internet. So it needs a way to privately resolve the SSM service, right? And that's what we're going to start with. There's a lot that's going to come from there, but let's start. So we're going to do SSM. I'll call it an interface endpoint, okay? If some of you were on this call too, when I was building and working, I told you that this is us consuming a private link from AWS. But there was a call I did before this one where we built our own private link. We basically built a private link that allowed two services to communicate with themselves. But think about it that in this case, we're using a private link already available from AWS. And what does it mean? We're saying that I'm currently just on the private subnets, right? But I want to use your SSM service. And AWS is saying, if you have to use my SSM service, then you need to connect to that service using private link, right? And this is what we're trying to do here. So we have to set up the SSM interface endpoints. What we're going to do is that we'll search for SSM here, right? The first one is SSM. We'll select it. We're going to throw it in that VPC, the black box VPC. It's there. This will enable private DNS so that it's resolved. Here, I'm just going to throw it on one subnet, and which is the US West 2A, right? So the private US West 2A. And if you remember at the beginning, I showed you this this particular security group. I showed you is very simple, right? It allows 443 and it allows everything to go out, right? So this is the one I'm going to use. I'm going to create this one and then give it full access. But even VPC endpoints, you can actually customize them. But here we're just going to use full access, and I'm going to create endpoints. Okay. Now this is for SSM, communicating with SSM. But remember, once the machine connects with SSM, there's always this back and forth, this bidirectional communication that has to happen for the machine to work. So this alone is not enough. We still need more interface endpoints. And because, for example, when you connect to the interface endpoint, for example, there are sometimes you need to SSM needs to be pinging the machine to know if it's alive or if it's still, if things are going well, right? That's why you need more interface endpoints. In this case, we're going to use the one called SSM messages, okay? So we're going to create more endpoints. So just let's go one at a time. So the next one we're going to be creating is called SSM messages, all right? We'll just call it interface endpoint. The point is that we know that when you connect to SSM, it's not enough. There's sometimes once that connection happens, there's need for messaging across. So we need that. So we'll do this. And then we'll create the same VPC black box. And then we'll choose that first availability zone that we chose. And then we'll do security group. We'll still be using the same security group. We'll use it throughout. Okay. So just think about it that the process is similar. It's just the kind of interface endpoints we're using, right? The kind of AWS private link. And then we need the last one, right? There is also the one that says the EC2 messages. We've done SSM messages, but there's also EC2 messages, which is more or less like the communication between EC2 instance and systems manager now. That has to also happen. So we'll create another endpoint, and we'll call it this. But if you've not watched my video on creating your own personal, how you can actually create yours, this is not going to, you really need to watch that video, because in that video, I actually showed you that when you are using AWS own, you can create yours, right? Here we're using the one AWS already has, but I showed you the very practical step of you creating these same endpoints that you're using. You can create yours, more or less like create it, make it very private, and then only someone who has access to it can use it. In this case, we are using one from AWS, right? So we'll use this, EC2 messages, I'll call it interface endpoint, right? So endpoint, okay? And then when we do that, the next thing we also want to do is almost the same, honestly, the same process. We'll do EC2 messages, we'll put it. So whenever you see yourself ever adding, you see an application, you join a team, they have like a number of VPC endpoints. This is the reason. It's doing this because maybe the EC2 machine is in a private subnet, but it needs to use a lot of the AWS service, and it doesn't need to go through the internet to do that. So you use VPC endpoints to basically allow that communication to happen over the private link without going to the internet, right? So we've thrown an EC2 machine in a black box, but now it needs to do some things, simple things like SSM, but it's not working. And we're trying to create endpoints that allows it to go out to AWS and establish that connection. So we're also going to go the same VPC. We'll use basically the same thing. So I think this step is well known now. We'll use that same black box VPC interface endpoint. Okay, so we'll give it full access, and I'm going to create endpoint. So let's go back to our endpoints. Let's see which one is creating. Sometimes they take time, but if you see two of them are available, and the third one is pending. So what have we done, right? We created, so let me go back to my diagram. So why this is creating, then we'll come back and revisit it, okay? So I'm going to show you my iPad to see what we've drawn before now, okay? So we said that we wanted to create a black box. A black box is really a machine that hosts a sensitive application. That's the way I'm going to call it. It's hosting a very sensitive application such that it does not need to it does not need to be connected to the internet. It cannot reach the internet, right? And in this case, we're going to host a very serious application on that black box. And we're saying that there are two ways, right? Because you need a set of package at the beginning for that black box to be ready, right? So there has to be a process that's more or less like bootstraps that black box, right? And we said, in this case, in the example here, we went through a public VPC, connected through the internet, and we created a machine, and then customized the machine, install Docker. That's really most importantly, we just install Docker. And then we created an AMI of it, right? Once we had that, but I said you can also use EC2 image builder, okay? We also said you can use EC2 image builder to do the same. But once we've created that EC2 machine, right, the next thing we did was to create a machine of that AMI in a private VPC. So we took something that was built from a public VPC and we threw it into a private VPC. That means we've severed all the connection to the internet. And we said now it's in the private subnet, but going forward, what needs to happen? We need to now be able to do a thing or two. But there's no way that is going to happen unless we enable the needed interface endpoint. And that's the stage we are. So this is like a recap. Just taking you, if you just joined the call, this is like me taking you back to where we've started from and where we are at the moment, okay? So let's continue. It's going to make sense at the end of the day. You're going to see the value in this, okay? So let's go back to the endpoints. Let me refresh this. Good, the endpoints are all available. So let me just hide my iPad screen so that it's clear. If I drag this down a bit, you will see that the three endpoints are available. So let's go back to that hanging EC2 instance. Remember, we were here at some point, we could not connect, but let's try to connect again. So what I'm going to just do, I'm going to refresh this page and see. All of a sudden, I can connect, right? All of a sudden, I can connect. So what it means is that now this machine is available for me to connect, but this machine is not on the internet, but now I can actually connect. So because I've enabled the necessary interface endpoints to be able to connect. So once that is in place, I'll just do connect. So here I'm going to be connecting just to verify the things we've already seen. Remember, if I do ping google.com, it's not going to work. This guy does not have access to the internet. It's completely shut down. But what I can do is to do sudo su, right? I'm sorry, I think I'm just going to do this and log in as sudo, and then I'm going to do Docker, right? And see. Yeah, Docker is there, right? Remember, this was what we did from the beginning. We basically installed, I think I need to remove this screen so that it's not, let me just take that out. I think it's not actually showing the screen as expected. So what I'm saying is that we're using the base AMI, and that AMI already has Docker. So if I do Docker PS, there's nothing, right? So we don't have any Docker service just running here. So it's fine. But the good news is that the same things we ran before, it means the machine already has Docker running. So we are very, very good at this point. So Docker version, good, we have Docker. So our black box has Docker running, okay? But it does not have access to the internet, good. Once that is in place, what else do we need to do? I also need to show you another one. So while that is in place, what we also now need to do is we can go back here. You see these fundamentals, they're the things you need. I know people know that there's a lot of models out there that can, teach you and all these things, but you see these practicals, they're the things that, they're the fundamentals that like no machine learning model can take away. There is no machine learning model today that can take these fundamentals from you. If you know them, you're just like a king in this world of tech, right? And that's why some of these things are things that I can show you in code in 2 minutes, 5 minutes, and all that. But no, sometimes you need the fundamentals. You need to understand how things, especially taking something that does not exist, and we built something very integral from it, right? So we have two. There's going to be more VPC endpoints, but for now, we just had two. Let's create the fourth one. The fourth one is that we do not need the fourth one, but I also want to show you something, right? So what we can do is that we'll go to that private box that is running. Remember, we tried to connect. SSM is set up perfectly and it's working fine, right? The next thing we want to do is that, what if we want to try Instance Connect? Do you think it's going to work? We can go connect using private subnet. Right now, there's no even way, because it needs, for you to be able to connect to that black box in a private manner, you also need a more or less like an Instance Connect endpoint for that to happen, because the machine is currently not in a private subnet, right? Similarly, if you wanted to go the private route and try to connect, there's no even way that is going to happen, right? So what we now need to do is that we can go back to where we're coming from. So we'll go to endpoint, we'll create a new endpoint. In this case, we're just going to call it Instance Connect, and we'll call it interface, okay, endpoint. But if you followed me, up until now, it's the same pattern. One security group to read them all. That's the one we created. But in this case, we're just going to use EC2 Instance Connect Endpoints. Okay. When we have that, we'll choose the same VPC that we had, the black box VPC. We'll use the same security group we've been using before. We'll use the same subnet and then we'll create it, right? So we'll give it time. Once this is created, it means that we should be able to go into that machine using Instance Connect. It's just showing you how you can actually extend more interface endpoints for you to be able to achieve what you want to do. But the good news of it is that we have an EC2 machine that is already running, that we can connect to, right? So it's here. You can basically connect to it using SSM Manager. We've seen that, right? So let's give it time for Instance Connect to be live, and then we'll go on to the next thing, right? We'll go on to the next thing. But remember, in the machine, if you go back to the machine, we know we have Docker, but that's not all. You can't just have Docker. What else? What else? You want to be able, you should be able to pull an image. You should be able to run an image. That image should be probably available to a load balancer at some point. All that should work. So this is just one piece to the puzzle. There's still more things we need to uncover to have our black box fully functional and available. Whether you want to have it served internally with an internal load balancer, or you want it available to the internet using a public load balancer, all that can happen, right? Good. So let's go back to the VPC endpoints and see the ones that are still creating. So VPC endpoint is here. Let me scroll to see what is available. This one is still pending, so let's give it some time to create. Okay, cool. While that is ongoing, I'm going to take you a bit to the code. Okay, I'm going to take you a bit to the code. Just so you know some of the other things that are going to come up. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here. I'm going to clear my screen. So in this black box, let me zoom in a bit. Okay, and if you know, I usually share labs in this call, so it's more or less like practicals, but some I show just a little code, especially for those things that there's no way you can manually just do them. Sometimes I try to just make, just put them in a small lab where it is easy for you to follow. Okay, but if you look at this code, we've done the main Terraform, right? This is really where we started from. We created a VPC that had just a private subnet. We created a security group, 2 security group for the EC2 machine, and for the instance, all the endpoints that we created, just for us to be able to achieve the things we want to achieve. So we're done. We've seen all that work, right? I think the last thing we want to just verify is that you can connect using Instance Connect, okay? The next thing is we know that having a black box does not make sense if there's no application running inside of it, right? So it doesn't make sense. So what I've done is here is I've created a very simple Docker file, but there is also like a lab that I created that has this, right? Docker 101 basically. But it is, if you ever know Docker, this is basic Docker. Just it's not a Docker class, but the whole idea is just for me to show you how a black box can work. Maybe in this case, maybe the application team, they own their whatever Docker file that exposes the application. In this case, it's just a FastAPI, simple Docker. Honestly, you can tell ChatGPT today, give me a simple FastAPI Docker file. It's going to give you. So it's not, but I'm just showing you here because it's not the aim of the class, right? But we still need to understand how it works. Okay, so this is me on my local machine. I have like a Docker file that will launch like a FastAPI service at the end of the day. It's here. And if you check main, simple stuff. There's just one that says health check endpoint, meaning if you hit /health, just return status is healthy. That's what most applications do, right? And then there are other endpoints that can do stuff. In this case, I am saying I'm using Boto3 and I'm saying S3, and I'm just getting object from a particular bucket, and I'm just picking something that is in data.json. Just think about it that here, this line of code, I'm just trying to access an AWS service from a black box that doesn't have access to the internet. That I'm trying to use that to show you. I'm trying to use that example to show you this concept. Okay, so this is going to be simple, and how we're going to go about it is that the first thing we want to do is this has to be, you have to build it, right? Maybe this is built from a CI process, maybe CI/CD, maybe your Jenkins, your what do you call it? GitHub Action, whatever it is. In this case, I'm just going to show you locally, right? So we're just going to build this image and we're going to push it to ECR. Okay, so first thing first, let me go and check ECR. I'm just going to go and check ECR, just so you know I don't have any, I don't have that repository first. So you can imagine how many services we're already touching, right? Because people come to meet me and they tell me, oh, we don't know AWS. Oh, can you teach us a lab? Can you, but this, it's all about this little piece that you add together. Sometimes the challenges you're trying to solve, they can come in different form, right? But it's just for you to understand the learnings that is coming with it. The fact that these little services, there's a way you can magically bring them together. It's not magic, It's also things you have to learn, right? From a call like this, you can begin to see patterns, and that's how you grow, okay? because I'm trying to show you ECR now. I can use ECR also in a very separate way, and it will make sense also, right? So the point is that we'll go back. So this is ECR. I don't have any repo. So but I'm going to create a repo first. So let's start from there. So let me create a repo. The repo name is going to be this, okay? Because I know even if I run any command and I say I don't have that repo, it's going to complain. So let me just create a repo, just basic repo, just leave it as is. So we've created a repo. It's called Docker 101 FastAPI. Okay. So we're going to go back to our source code and we'll look at that Docker file that we saw just now. So it's Docker file. So we are in here. So we're in that directory that has the Docker file, right? We have a Docker file that is built already. It has a main.py file that will run, basic stuff. So the next thing I really want to do is I want to build this Docker image. So if you know this command, it's very simple. But in this case, because I'm on Mac, I'm saying build for Linux, right? So Docker build, giving it a platform, Linux, AMD, and then I'm tagging it. So I'm tagging it, blah, 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 to latest, right? So I'm just giving it a name. So Docker 101 FastAPI, just tag it to latest. So I'll do that, right? So let me actually remove this. Okay, so the image has been built. So meaning this Docker file, honestly, if you're new to Docker, it's easy. Docker is really easy. You just need to pay some attention to understand the things that happen. But in this case, I just took everything that is. So what I did was to just go through this instruction, go through each step, blah, 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 copy the working directory, copy main.py, do everything basically, and then just start running the main/app. The main/app is, if you go to Python, is main, right? And it's in the main file and it's running this app. That's it. So, and that will give me like a Python application. I can test this locally. It's going to work. But now I've built it. The next thing I want to do is I want to tag it. So I'm just going to tag it here. So if you notice what I'm doing here, I'm tagging what I built locally, and I'm tagging it to a repo called FastAPI latest. So I'm just tagging. And basically, I built something locally, and I'm also tagging it. Just let me move my screen a bit so that you can actually see the full command. I don't know if my eyes should be here. Maybe up there is better. I don't know. But the point is that I just built it locally. I tagged it, right? That's what I've done. So I've tagged it to something that I'm going to push to ECR, okay? The next thing you need to also do is you need to log in. Usually before you can actually publish to ECR, you have to log in. So the first thing you do is, it's simple. There's like a command to say AWS ECR, get login password. I'm trying to get a login password. So this person has to have that permission. And then I'm saying Docker login, and I'm logging into the repo that I showed you, right? More or less like I'm logging to this account, the ECR in this account. So once I do that, I should get login successful or succeeded, right? So I've logged in now. The next thing I really want to do is to just push the image, right? Because I built it already. I basically just now want to push it. So I'm just going to take that image that I built locally, and this is the command. So I'm saying Docker push, because I've tagged it already. So I've tagged it to FastAPI latest. I think there's a typo here, but I think it's latest. I'm just going to push it, right? So it's trying to push. So at this point, this should be basic stuff, honestly. This one that I'm doing is basic stuff. Writing a Docker file, But if it's not basic, you can reach out to me if you ever want. But I have a community that I'm building where we can help ourselves grow, right? If you're actually trying to learn Docker, the basics of Docker, you want to be sharing your findings, that's why I'm here, honestly. The things I teach here, obviously, are things I know. I'm teaching it to someone to benefit, somebody new, somebody I've met before. And you can see I've met a lot of people through just sharing my knowledge here. But the point is that this one that I'm doing here is not the core of the things that I'm teaching you, but it's also needed for you to more or less like internalize the concept, because in this case, I'm packaging a service locally, containerizing it, and I'm pushing it to ECR. So if I go back to ECR now, that container will be there, right? But that's not where we're going to. So if I go back to ECR, if I click on FastAPI, there's an image. This image, we pushed it from a local directory, but this could also come from your CI/CD pipeline, Jenkins, whatever you're doing your build process from, right? So it's not the most important thing. Now we have this image in ECR. We have a black box, right? That we want to be able to run the service from, right? But in a private way, in a very secure manner. It does not have access to the internet. How will it pull the image from ECR? How will it do all that stuff? It's the next question we are going to be answering. Okay. So let's go back to So we'll go to EC2, right? We'll check that black box that we've created. Instance. Remember the last thing we were trying to do. So it's now a good reminder. Remember the last thing we were trying to do was to see if we can actually connect using Instance Connect, not using SSM now, but Instance Connect, right? So we'll go in and we'll click on it. And we'll try to connect again now. Not SSM. SSM works. Let's try Instance Connect. Let's use private. And then let's choose that endpoint that we created. Remember, we created an endpoint. It's now complete. So we'll try to connect and see what we get. Let's see what we get. Fine. We're also inside the box. So we've connected using two ways. A completely black box, a complete black box. We've connected using Instance Connect. And we've also connected using, Session Manager, right? So here is the same. I'm already logged in at root. I can do Docker, the same command we've been running before, just to confirm if Docker is still running. Docker is there, right? Because it's all from the base image that was built, right? So we're good at this point. The next thing is we want to run the service we built in a private manner. The question is, how do we have access to ECR like here? Ideally, I know that the command I ran before is the same command I'm going to run here, right? I want to be able to run this container. But that same command that I ran before on-premise, I'm saying on-premise now, but I'm just saying on my local machine. Let's try to run it. So this is the full command. I'm going to paste it here. It's the same command that I ran before on my local machine. I'm saying AWS ECR get login password. The region I want to log into is US West 2. So I'm getting the password. I'm using that password to log in, right, to Docker. Do you think this is going to work? There's no way it's going to work. It's not going to work. The reason is because it's a black box. You're trying to log in. You're trying to do Docker login, but the guy does not have access to the internet. So there's no way this is going to work. Okay? There's no good way this is going. Remember that if you want to run, if you log into Docker, you want to pull down image, all that is you're downloading stuff, right? You have to go out and get it. But in this case, you're doing all this from a black box. There's no way it's going to work. So the next thing we want to do is basically, how do we have ECR working also here? Remember before now, we've done many things. We've enabled Instance Connect. We've enabled Session Manager using the interface endpoint. And now we have another hurdle to face, which is how do we get access to ECR? There'll be many more hurdles to face, because why I'm smiling is because if you go back to the code that I was showing you, there's also a place here we're using S3. So we also need to solve connecting to S3 and doing stuff with S3, but not over the internet, rather in a private manner, in a box, right? So what we're going to do is, let's go back and let's build the next stuff. So here, it's not going to work, so let me not stress myself. So it means we need more endpoints. So whenever you see endpoints in your journey, whether you've seen endpoints before or you're just seeing endpoints, just understand that endpoints are really the things that helps you to connect to AWS services in the private and secure manner, okay? Even if you're not connected to the internet, you still can do a lot of the many beautiful things that AWS supports without being connected to the internet, okay? Remember, that black box right now does not have any business with the internet. So the next thing we want to do is we want to create more interface endpoints, because now we need to use ECR as the next problem to face, okay? So we'll create ECR, and we'll call it interface endpoint, okay? Endpoint, in this case, is also an AWS service. The same thing that we've done before. The only thing is we'll use ECR, right? In this case, the API is the one we're targeting. We'll create it. We'll select the VPC. It's a black box VPC, right? And then we'll use the same pattern we've been going before, private subnet. And then we'll scroll down, and then we'll use this as the interface endpoint, okay? We'll do that, and then we'll create the endpoint, okay? Good. So this is for ECR related calls, right? So if you're trying to make ECR related calls, right? API calls, but we need more. There's also one that when you want to interact with Docker, you need that, right? So we're going to create that one next. So we'll do ECR, and we'll call DKR, interface endpoint, okay? And endpoint, right? So we'll do AWS service, and we'll call, it's still ECR, right? But it's just a different flavor of ECR. So you can see there's ECR.dkr, right? Which is the one we want. We'll select it. We'll click on it. We'll use the private VPC that we want, the black box VPC. We'll go in, basically the same stuff. If you think about it, that's why that code is important. I'm going to share it. But the point is that one security group rules all, right? So we're pushing it in the same subnet. We're going to use the same security group that I've created. It's the same step, right? This Terraform can do this easily, but there's a reason why I'm doing it basically like step by step so that you get the concept. So we're going to create the endpoint. So we'll create the endpoint. And then with these two endpoints created, let's go and see what we can do. Can we make more progress? So let's scroll down a bit to see the endpoint that has been created. I'm just going to move down. Most of them are available, just one that is creating. But let me just give it some time for this one to create, and then we'll go back and see if we've made progress, right? Remember, the last thing we're trying to do is we're trying to log in. There's no way you can pull from ECR without logging in first, right? So we will try this and see if it's done, and then we'll go back and try to log into ECR and see if that works. Okay, if it works, then we're making progress gradually. The whole idea is we want to be able to run our private service, our very secure private service that is completely secure, and we'll run it, and then we can also incorporate some other things to either make it still internal or expose it to the internet. Okay. So let's see. It's all available now. So all of them are available. So the next thing we want to do is that let's go back to the EC2 instance. We're here. Let's clear our screen so that it's like we're starting from scratch. Let's go back to the command again. This is the same command we ran locally, but locally we're connected to the internet. Here we don't have access to the internet, but let's try it again and see. Let's see if it's going to go. This time, let me just be sure I have this, I have that. It's required. Sometimes it takes time. Actually, when you enable it like this, sometimes it takes time. Sometimes you usually even have to just leave the machine and come back. But let me just get out of the machine, right? And then come back to it. Okay. So I'm going to connect. I can use any of the, we've already established that we can connect using any of the both of them, right? So whether it's Instance Connect or Session Manager, we've established that. So we will still go back here and connect. Just use this one. I'm just going to do, so I'm just going to carry that command again, right? So the command we're trying to do. Remember, the first thing we're trying to do is basically, so I'm going to do sudo, to go in a sudo, and then the same command we're trying to do before. Let's see. It's still hanging, so I'm not sure, but let's see. I'm just trying to be sure we have all of them. Let me see. Yeah, it's still hanging. Just trying to make sure that we have it. I know there is one more, but I'm trying to make sure that we have this even working in the first place. Okay. It looks like it says these DKR, ECR. You can see the endpoint it's using, right? So you can see it's using DKR, ECR. These cancelled while waiting for connection, but I suspect I might know the problem. So let me go back to the code. I suspect I know the problem here that is happening. Let me go back to cursor where we were before. Okay, so I'm going to clear the screen. We're done with the Docker side of things. So let's go back to where I was. Let me try to apply this again. I think I know the problem. It could be one thing that is missing. Yes. So this is going to go. This is going to. What is changing? Yes. Is it removing this or what? I'm just trying to be sure of something. It's removing this SSH. But let me try something. Just refresh. Okay, that is done. And let me try this again. Yeah, you can see it works. So it looks like the security group was tampered. But the point is that ideally we are not on the internet, but we can connect to ECR, right? So at this point, you can actually pull image. You don't have to be on the internet to pull image. So you can see that we can log in, right? So we can log in. We also have Docker command running. Docker is running. If you have Docker running in a box, private box, and then you can also log in. I think the next thing is basically for you to, the next thing is really for you to run the same application we ran locally, right? But there's still more hurdle to cross. We will get there. So the next thing we want to do now is let's try and run that same image that we ran before, right? So the same image that we ran. So you know that for us to run that image, once we've logged in, we'll pull it down, right? So we're saying Docker pull, we're just referencing the repo, and we're saying the latest image, right? So I'm going to do pull, but it's going to be stuck here, right? And the reason is because when you're trying to use ECR behind the scene, you know how it is when you're building with Docker, you're basically pulling files. Some of these things needs to be cached in S3, but again, this particular box is also a very black box. It does not have access to S3. So for this to happen, we need to basically expose S3 to this, right? So this is not going to work. It's going to try to pull. It showing that it's trying to pull means it's connected to ECR, but because you're pulling layers, and those layers has to be cached in S3, for it to show up properly, we need more interface endpoints. So it's nice because we're building the black box, but we are just using a lot of the interface endpoints that we need for us to get this black box to work, right? Good. So we need to create one more interface endpoint, and this time we're going to create endpoint. We're going to do S3 gateway endpoint. Remember, you can have different types for S3. You can have S3 is one of those services that has interface and gateway endpoint, right? In this case, we're going to use the gateway endpoint, right? So because it's free. It's free. If you use all the interface endpoints we've been creating since, it comes with the cost, but gateway endpoint is basically free. So we will type S3, right, and do this one. So the S3 endpoint, we'll use the gateway one because we don't want to pay any money for this one. You can also use the interface if you wanted, just that it comes with the cost and it has its own different advantage, but that's not what this class is about. So I'm going to go to black box, and then I'm going to go back to the same thing we're doing. So private US West 2A is what we've been doing. You don't really need to create, in this one, you don't need to give it a security group. So we're going to create the gateway endpoint, okay? So we will give it some time. I think that was fast. It's already available. So the only thing you need to, let's try. It's available, so let's try what we're doing again and see if it's going to work. It did timeout, so let me clear it and try it again. So we'll try. Oh, okay, now it's pulling. So it's basically pulled down the image. So from ECR now, it's pulling, right? Remember, we still don't have access to google.com, right? So all this is happening privately. We still don't have access to the internet. So, but I mean, if you do Docker images, for example, yeah, we have an image that we pulled. So now we have an image. We basically have an image, right? An image is on our local machine. If an image is run on our local machine, what else do you think is needed? We basically need to run that image. That's it. So I have a command here that will basically expose, because if you go back to the application is running on, let's go back to the application. The application is actually running on port 8000, right? So the whole idea is now is I want to run that application, but expose it on 80 on the machine, on the EC2 machine. So that's all we're just going to do. So I have a command that is going to run that. So I'm just going to paste it. So let me actually clear this first and then paste that command. So here, what am I doing? I'm saying run this particular image that is in ECR, right? The image actually runs on 8000, but expose it on 80 on the machine, and that's it, right? So let me do this and do what's there. So it looks like it's running, meaning if you do Docker PS, there is a container there, right? And if I do Docker logs, logs of that container, what it means is that it's actually running. So it pulled the image from ECR, all in the black box. It pulled the image from ECR. It is running it already. You can see from the logs, we can actually call, so this is on the machine. Remember, this is not Docker. This is like we're inside the machine, not inside Docker. So, but we can do call HTTP, HTTP and give it localhost, right? Just do localhost and do /health because I know that's where the health is. You can see it's working. So if we go back to like locally, we saw there were two endpoints. One of the endpoints is status health, healthy, right? So there's the health check, there is /health. There is also one that would go to S3, right? We've not tested that one first, but now we're just testing the one that is like living inside of what you call it, inside of the health endpoint. So let's go. It looks like it's working. If we want to format it, let me just use JQ to format it very properly, right? So you can see it gives us status healthy, right? Now, what about if we try the home page? Good. And we do this. Perfect. Okay, now you can see there's actually an error. It says an error occurred, no such bucket when calling the get object operation. The specific bucket does not exist, which is good. Surprisingly, I think we've solved this problem somehow, unintentionally. The reason is because this would have not worked, right? This would have not worked at all. The reason it's working is because at some point in our journey, in what we were doing, at some point we created more endpoints, right? So we created the S3 endpoints. That's why it's actually working. So if you remember, we created some endpoints, and there was a time we created the S3 gateway endpoints. That's why it worked. If not, it wouldn't have worked, okay? So just know that that's not magic. It's because we created like a gateway, S3 gateway endpoint, and that's why it's working. So let's go back to that, so let's fix the issue. I think the remaining issue is kind of simple. What it's saying, that, let's go back to the box, the instance, here it's saying no bucket exists, which is understandable. I know that bucket he wants. Let me check. I don't think we have that bucket. The bucket is Brainyl bucket, black box bucket. So let's create this bucket now. I'm going to create this bucket. So I'm going to go to S3, blah, blah, blah. I'll go here, create it. So I'm going to create a bucket. We know how we create bucket now. You just basically, I'll just tie everything down, ACL is disabled, Docker public access. I don't need bucket versioning. I can just go with the default, right? So the bucket is created. I'm just going to check the black box bucket. I'm going to upload the file because actually I know that from code. Because again, your application, infra. People think infra is magic, but infra is basically the infra is handling the application. So whatever is in the application, this is the application, right? But whatever is in the application the infra has to match what the application is expecting. So in this case, the application at some point needs to read a bucket. It needs to read a data.json file, and it's actually this file, right? So all I just need to do is make sure that bucket is there, make sure the file is there. So I'm going to go back and do upload a file. I'm just going to do add files. I've seen it before, it's this one, so I'm just going to upload, and then I'll upload the file. So we now have the bucket, we now have the file. Remember, all this can be infra code, right? But it's fine, we can do it manually. Let's go back to where we're coming from, and let's try again this time and see what happens. Perfect. It's now seeing the bucket. So it's getting the bucket, it's getting the data.json. This is exactly what I just uploaded just now that I uploaded. That's it. So it's getting hello from S3. So we have an application that is really, really working well, but all in a black box, because this machine right now is not connected to the internet. But we were able to go in, first of all, using Session Manager. We're able to connect. We're also able to go into, Instance Connect. We're able to connect. We were able to pull images without being connected to the internet, right? From ECR. We're able to log into ECR. We're able to pull in images from ECR. It also worked. And we were also able to read from S3. It's also working, right? So just think about it. If you go back to all the endpoints that you see here, for example, just know that anything that is mentioned here, we can continue to build that black box, right? Without, if I want to create endpoints here. So you see everything that is mentioned here, 507. It's just that, each endpoint comes with a cost, right? That's just the only difference. But the point is that all the service here, whether it's Dynamo, Dynamo has gateway endpoint. But the point is that you can have a black box that, if it does not need to download anything from the internet, that is not inside of AWS, you can continue to create the service that you need, the endpoints that you need. You can continue to create them, and that black box will continue to use them to do anything it needs to do without actually being connected to the internet, okay? So we've been able to solve that problem. And now we have like a box that is really working. It's working as expected. The only thing we need to do, but again, the video is getting, we've been doing this I've been doing this for a while, but I can actually extend this example forward, and we can pretty much put this behind a load balancer, right? So we can take this, put it behind maybe an internal load balancer or like a public load balancer for you to be able to resolve it, right? Because at the end of the day, we know that a particular service, in this case, the service we are deploying, is not enough. Sometimes you still need pretty much to have like a load balancer behind it, right? So we can from this point. But again, maybe I don't want to stretch it because we just built a black box and we used all the very wonderful interface endpoints in AWS to power it. And as you can see, it's working. The box itself is not connected from the internet. But again, how you know, if I actually want to extend this, put a load balancer behind it, but I want to focus it on a black box, right? But how you know it's actually working is that I can actually go to Cloud Shell, for example, just so you know it's actually working. I can create Cloud Shell. So it means anything load balancer would also work. So if I go to Cloud Shell and I create a new environment called a VPC environment in this case, because we're talking about inside of a VPC. So I'll just call it VPC env, right? And then I'm going to go to this black box. In the subnet, I'm going to use the 2A that we've been using. Security group, I'm just going to use one of those security groups that is out there. It's fine because it allows all outbound traffic, right? So let's it create this VPC environment. And once it's done, let's actually test that application from outside of the machine, right? So that you know it's actually working, because if it works from here, that means you can actually expose it using a load balancer, right? But that machine doesn't have access. We didn't install an internet, we didn't install Internet Gateway, we didn't install NAT Gateway, none of that. And everything is working as expected. So let's give it time to load. And once we test, it's working fine. We'll be good to go. We'll now tear down because I don't want to extend it for us to use load balancer. But it's fine. We can actually extend if we wanted. So what I'm going to do is to crawl the IP of the machine. So I'm going to go here, copy the machine's IP address outside of that machine. So I'm just going to do curl HTTP and do this and just do this, right? And if I also do, so the same command that we ran before is still going to work. So, but we're doing this now from a very different environment, right? Not inside of the machine, just so you know that the machine is actually serving traffic outside. And you know that that machine can actually be a target to a load balancer that we can actually expose. But that's like a good place for us to wrap this up. What did we learn? We learned that you can actually have a complete black box. It doesn't have the internet. But the thing is that through my journey on AWS, I've seen a lot of people, they know VPC endpoints exist, but some people don't really know when to compose them, how to bring them together, when you need a VPC endpoint. Some people have VPC endpoint, they're just there, they are not using it, but they're paying for it, because you don't really know when you're using it and when you're not, right? But we've seen how we had a black box that didn't work, and we're able to gradually see which of the endpoints we needed to enable for the service to work, right? And that is what brought us here. So as with most of my classes, I usually do cleanups. So what I'm going to be doing is, first of all, I'm just going to terminate the Cloud Shell environment. So I'm just going to delete this one, just in case, because I'm going to upload this video afterwards, so that in case anybody's going through the lab, they can also more or less, like, if they are doing it on their own, they can basically tear down, so that if somebody will not say, oh, I went through your lab and then I started getting costs from AWS. So I'm just going to make sure I'm cleaning down things. So the most important things I need to clean down, first of all, is to go back to the bucket, right? So we created one bucket. So I'm just going to empty the bucket. Once I empty it, I'm going to delete it. And so I'm going to do this, permanently delete. And then I'm going to go back to the bucket directory, and then I'm going to delete the bucket. So I will paste the name of the bucket. But honestly, if you can continue like this gradually, that's how you build context over time. AWS, like the AWS, people talk about the cloud knowledge that people talk about. It's just context from small things that you work on and the learnings that you get from them. And that's really how you grow over time, okay? So that is gone. The next thing I really want to delete is to go back to the EC2 instance. I'm done with the black box, so I don't need it anymore. I'm just going to delete that EC2 instance, so terminate it, right? So terminate. Remember, these things that I'm terminating are the things I created inside of the console, but the things I created from code, I'm just going to delete those ones from code, right? So while this one is terminating, I'll just go and look for the repo, the repository. I created a particular repo, right? So Docker FastAPI, I'm just going to delete the repo. So when I delete the repo, it's also going to delete the images that are inside. So it's gone. What else do I need to delete? I want to delete the EC2 instance is being deleted. Let me refresh. It's shutting down, it's terminating. While that is in place, remember we created an AMI from the base EC2 machine that we used, right? So that's the next thing I want to do. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to select all these AMIs that I've created. I'm just going to, first of all, deregister the AMI. So there's like the register, and then delete them, right? So all the snapshot that is associated, I'm just going to terminate them. So they are gone. So the AMIs are gone. The EC2 machine is also gone, right? So just to be sure, it's gone. The next thing I want to do is delete all the VPC endpoints that I created. You see, just like we've been here for like how many minutes, but we've created a lot of service, right? We've played with a lot of things. So I'm just going to delete all the endpoints that we created. This one, I think you have to delete them one after the other. So I'm just going to be doing delete. It's painful when you don't create it from code, but it's also good because that's really where you get the experience. You see exactly what you need to add for you. So if you're starting your journey, please, as much as ChatGPT is there, there's so many IDs that are helping you. Please don't shy away from the fundamentals. The fundamentals is really what is going to keep you in this race for a longer period. People these days, they're fast, vibe coding and everything. But if you don't understand the fundamentals, you're going to struggle at some point. So please, especially if you're just starting your journey, always understand, why do you have a service? Why do you need to use this thing? Why do you keep, build that understanding and grow from there, okay? So I'm just going to be pasting deletes, just going to be deleting them. I'm just going to be clicking on delete, just to delete all the endpoints, because VPC interface endpoints, they come with a cost. So if you don't delete them, you're going to be charged. So I'm just going to delete them, continue to delete. We created a bunch of them. So I think, let me see which one is still, so only one is still available. I'm going to delete. So I'm just going to delete. So I'm going to give it time. Once it's done deleting, the next thing I'm going to do is just to tear down the VPC that we created from Terraform, right? So we'll just delete the VPC, the IAC stuff. And once that is done, we're good. We've built a black box, and then we've gone through step-by-step process of like having like a black box and having it run on AWS. So let me give it some time. Sometimes it takes time to delete. So let's see, it's deleting. And you know why some of these things are also very important is that if you ever find yourself in the cloud journey, DevOps journey, many times you're in the account troubleshooting stuff, right? When you are troubleshooting, sometimes, yeah, you need to know how things are connected. I know, yeah, AI models can help you, they can link you and all that, but sometimes you need to get something resolved very, very fast. I don't think that's when you want to be asking ChatGPT, oh, my environment is like this, because you know how things are connected. You know the things that, I'm not saying there are not times you will not need like any of these AI systems, but the fundamentals are always very good. That's what also gives you that confidence, right? When you speak to someone or you find yourself in the place, there's this confidence that you have that you just know that to some extent you can speak. You can speak based on a particular subject, okay? So please, if you find this useful, you can put it in the comment section and how it has been for you. And once I'm done, I'm also going to, if you want to send in a request, you want to talk, if you've been here since I started yapping about this and you want to more or less like talk about it, or you want to add anything that I missed, yeah, we can have that conversation. But I'm still just making sure I clean up in the video just to make sure anyone who goes through this at some point can basically, okay, that one too is deleted. Opportunity, you're here. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, usually I come here by 3 o'clock, but today I didn't announce that I'll be here, so it's understandable. Some of the people who expect me like Sunday 3 o'clock, they don't know if I'm even here, which is fine. And also, it's the new year also, right? People are still celebrating their new year. Not a lot of people on TikTok trying to learn, so it's fine. It's not. Usually, I just want to give that value, and record this and upload somewhere that people can also see it, and learn. So somebody would always benefit from this, especially if you've seen this in real field. You understand the difference, and that's why I started from you creating a service that uses it, right? And then also this is like a continuation for you to use the one that AWS provide and see it in practical how it works, right? Step by step. So which is what we've been able to solve. So I think we've deleted everything that is dependent that we created manually. The next thing we want to do is basically delete the things that we created from code, right? So I'm just going to go Terraform, destroy. That's going to tear down. Okay, I think I'm not in the right directory. Here. I thought I was, where am I? Terraform. Did I miss that command or what? Maybe. Yeah, I think I was using the wrong command. But here, I'm just going to destroy the things that we created from infrastructure as code. So it's going to delete all the routables, the VPC, the roles, it's gone. So I can say officially we did well and we went through a very useful and powerful lab. Okay, I think while I'm here, I'm just going to delete this. I don't think I need it, but I'm going to delete it. And that is pretty much it. That is pretty much it. I hope you had time, you learned something. Please subscribe to my channel. If you're watching this and you want to continue your AWS journey and you want to learn, I always upload content every now and then where I teach you the things you need, not just things. I teach you core things that makes you stand out as an AWS expert, kind of, right? So those are the things I teach you, the things that I know. It gives you a very good foundation for you to learn other things by yourself, right, as you grow. Okay, so I'm happy we were able to go through this. We built a very black box and we were able to see how we can actually use all the PrivateLink services that AWS has, use them to build something that was completely, that doesn't rely on the internet, right? Cool. Thank you for watching. I hope I see you in the next series.